Hello and welcome to the Foundation Center's Before You Seek a Grant, a Checklist for New Nonprofits webinar. My name is Caroline Herbert. I'm the Manager of Multimedia Training for the Foundation Center and happy to have you with us today. If you're not familiar with the Foundation Center, we are a national nonprofit organization. We've been around since 1956, and our mission is to strengthen the social sector by advancing knowledge about philanthropy in the U.S. and around the world. And what we're going to do in today's webinar on Before You Seek a Grant, as the course title indicates, the purpose of this webinar is really to help you determine whether you're ready for foundation fundraising. So we're really focusing today on your grant-seeking readiness. And we'll be looking at three main topics, starting with the characteristics of successful nonprofit organizations. Then we'll talk about what funders are looking for when they review grant applications. And then with the key elements of getting started, we'll cover really how you can start building up those characteristics in your organization. And we'll also cover some additional resources available online. Before we get into that content of the characteristics of successful nonprofit organizations, I wanted to introduce the concept of nonprofit life cycles. Because as you know, a fully functioning, effective nonprofit doesn't just appear out of thin air. So it helps to think of your organization as evolving. And there's several stages here of organizational development. In the idea stage, you really have no formal structure. I mean, you have an idea. You've started to talk to people about what you want to do to change the world or help your community, but you haven't incorporated a nonprofit. You don't have your tax exemption, things like that. Really, you're just in the formative stage. The startup stage is where you do start to become legal in terms of setting up the legal structure like incorporation, tax exemption, and recruiting your first formal board of directors. And in the growth stage, that's where you really put the pedal to the metal and implement your idea, implement your programs, grow your programs, define your reputation, and often you do end up becoming more formal or professional. The organizations, certainly in the idea stage, often through the startup stage, you are all volunteer. You do not have paid staff. And it's in the growth stage where you may make that transition to have paid employees and professional staff. Although certainly there are many organizations that have been around for years that are still really grassroots and volunteer run. So there's no set model that you have to, at this point, you have to have staff or you have to do X, Y, Z. But the mature organization, just to finish out these different stages, that's where you have established your reputation in your field. You have established board of directors. You often do have professional staff, well-run programs, and maybe your finances are on stabler ground as well. All right, so now that we've covered the various stages, I would say if you're in the idea startup, even into the growth stage, what we're going to be talking about next with the characteristics of successful organizations is going to be rather intimidating. So the way to think about this is, okay, this is what I'm working towards, and this class is called Before You Seek a Grant, so we're thinking about how can I be ready to approach foundations. So looking at these characteristics of effective organizations, the reason we're doing it at the beginning of this webinar is really these are the kinds of characteristics that a foundation would be looking for if you are applying. So there are a number of things you're expected to have in place before you seek a grant. So that's really what we're trying to establish with this section. And we're starting out here with a little quote that comes from an organization called Grantmakers for Effective Organizations that literally does what it sounds like. It's a group of funders who are interested in organizational effectiveness. And we chose this little quote to start out here because we think really in a nutshell, this sums up the key characteristics. So I'm just going to underline a few of the key phrases here. So definitely talking about fulfilling your mission, measurably achieving your objectives, talking about your management, your governance, and my favorite part is the end here, your persistent rededication to achieving results. So let's break this down. We have a couple slides with a number of bullet points, and then we'll be going into more detail on a lot of these. So your mission, compelling mission. The mission is a statement of the needs and problems your organization exists to address. So the mission statement answers the question, why? What's the purpose of your organization? So certainly foundations are going to look to see that you have, a very articulate, compelling mission that speaks to what they're interested in as well. Capable leadership. Think for a new organization, they're going to look very closely at your leaders. If they're not familiar with your organization, you want to see, okay, well, who are the people involved and what kind of experience do they have? So looking at your governance, that is the board of directors. The board of directors who's responsible for governing the organization and exercising oversight. Management, those are the people running the organization on a day-to-day basis. And we're using the word staff, which for many people implies paid employees, but you can get that out of your mind for now. I mean, when we say staff, it can be volunteer. As we already said, for a startup, often you don't have money to pay staff, so it is volunteer staff. But whatever the status, it's who's in charge. It's what the foundation's going to be looking at. Programs and services. So your organization's program should be relevant to the needs of the community you serve, so relevancy. You need to be able to demonstrate the need, especially as a new organization. You're going to be challenged, why do we need another organization serving the homeless? And why do we need another youth program? So, and I'm sure you have a very good reason why, that there's still a great need to be met. You need to be able to articulate and document that need. Funders are looking for high quality, well-regarded programs. This is what you're building up to, as we already said. The operations and support systems, how well do you deliver your programs and services? Do you have the support systems in place to assure the effective delivery of your services? In other words, what competencies do you have in place, capabilities? If I give you a grant, are you going to be able to hit the ground running to implement this program? And here's our cycle of an organization rededicating itself to results, your cycle of planning, implementation, evaluation. Very important to the funder. How are you measuring your success? Your facilities need to be adequate for the scope and nature of your work. Your finances. A funder is looking, and you want to have diverse revenue streams. Also accounting management, just being able to track the grant money, having an operating budget, having a program budget, which for an established organization is like, oh yeah, of course we have our budget. But for a startup, it's like, what, an operating budget? I don't know. Having to figure out everything I'm going to be spending money on this year. Well, yeah, funder's going to want all that kind of financial information. And then history, track record. And of course, this is a big catch-22 with a new organization. Foundations are looking for a successful organizational history, but, well, I don't have that, and I can't get funded to even start out on that path. So how do you deal with this issue? Well, one way is by demonstrating you have a strong and committed board of directors with their own track records of success, and that you have a good financial plan. So even if you don't have a lot of money in the bank, you have a plan as to how you're going to get it. Now, everything we just discussed are the key characteristics of successful, effective nonprofit organizations. So when you are approaching foundations for funding, they're going to look for these characteristics. And without them, they're not likely to fund you, regardless of how strong your proposal is. So the next slide, we're going to be going over some of these issues, some of these characteristics in more detail, starting with the mission. So for a new nonprofit, developing a mission statement is a critical first step in defining what you plan to do and also explaining how you differ from similar organizations. And as we said a minute ago, the mission statement answers the question, why? So we're covering the purpose, also the service, the how you do things, and the beneficiaries of your work. And we have a little example here from a United Way, which I think is a familiar type of organization. So the purpose, very broad, purpose to inspire the people of this county to make a difference. How do they do it? Well, they talk about financial generosity and volunteer commitment is alluding to, the kind of services or programs they would have. Who benefits? Well, really the people, all the people of this county, it sounds like, are going to benefit. So your mission statement, it can be kind of broad and doesn't have, and general. Of course, behind this is the mission statement. There could be many, many details and many more words describing, okay, these are all our programs. But your mission statement, really think about every single word, the importance of every single word in your mission statement. Because this is really what is going to draw people to your organization and motivate them to get involved. And many organizations may have a vision statement as well. So your mission statement, the way to think about that is your mission statement is telling the world what you're doing now. And your vision statement is kind of what the world would look like if you accomplished your mission, is one way to think about those two statements. And your mission statement is going to motivate people now, energize people to get involved, and your vision statement may inspire them to stick around. The next big issue we're going to talk about is your board of directors. So one of the key steps in establishing an organization is to set up your initial board, and you are required by law, state and corporation laws, to have a volunteer board. And the board has the ultimate authority for governance, oversight, and public accountability. So really, they are the public face of the organization and the bridge between the organization and the community. So there are a number of things that board members are responsible for, and this comes from, we have a site at the bottom for boardsource.org. BoardSource is the #1 organization working on governance issues in the nonprofit sector, so a great resource. And they publish publications like the legal responsibilities of nonprofit boards, the legal responsibilities, 10 basic responsibilities. We've taken summarized their publications here on this slide to outline these basic responsibilities, which are determining the organization's mission and purpose, selecting, supporting, overseeing the chief executive, so the chief staff person at the organization in charge with executing the mission, ensuring effective organizational planning, translating a broad mission into measurable goals and objectives, ensuring adequate resources and seeing that they're managed effectively. So it's approving budgets, it's fundraising, bringing in resources for the organization. Determining, monitoring, strengthening your programs, and ensuring a legal and ethical integrity and maintaining their own accountability and assessing their own performance. So really, the key indicator that the board is doing its job is if they earn and maintain the public trust. And they also, in their oversight role, are making sure that the nonprofit is operating in accordance with the laws. So they're working on those kinds of oversight issues, fundraising, strategic planning, and when it comes to the time when you're able to have paid staff and hire a chief executive, those kinds of personnel issues are also going to involve the board. So finding your first board is the biggest challenge. So they're the public face of the organization, the ones ultimately accountable for the organization. And too often a founder thinks of the organization as his or hers. But whether you're around or not, in the long term, the nonprofit you create should be able to exist in perpetuity. So the people who are supposed to make it happen are the board members. So how do you find desirable board members? The essence of a good board member, at the core, is someone who really believes in your mission and is motivated to work towards your mission, accomplishing your mission, has the ability, the willingness to work in a group, and is able to support willing to support the organization in some way. So we have talent, time, and treasure, the 3 T's. Talent refers to someone who's knowledgeable in a particular field. Could be the field you're working in, could be things like legal, accounting, public relations. I mean, there are any number of skill sets that you may want to tap into. Time refers to the willingness to put in the time to not only go to meetings, but doing all sorts of things that can be helpful to your organization, especially in the startup phase when the board is usually a working board because there is no paid staff. And then treasure refers to giving financial contributions themselves or finding others who will. And I think if you're moving forward, if you want to be competitive looking for foundation grants, foundations often, more and more frequently, do ask what percentage of your board members are making a personal financial contribution. So I think setting something up, a policy where you're encouraging people to give what for them is a substantial contribution. So I think with a new organization, obviously, you usually don't have the luxury of saying, oh, you must give a minimum of a certain amount of money. You're setting up, too many barriers to board service when you're trying to get people to come on the board, but saying, we'd like you to give what for you would be a significant contribution. So getting, usually for a new organization, your core board members are your supporters, your only supporters, because you're not yet able to go out and get external funding like grants. So it's not so easy to find all of these characteristics in one individual, but you're looking for the right composition as you recruit board members. You're probably also looking for possibly people who represent the community's diversity, maybe your constituents you want represented on the board. I mean, it really is depending on your organization, your culture, in terms of what kind of makeup you would want on your board. And as you build your board, you're likely to begin with people you know or even people you're related to. So you need to put your conflict of interest policy in place. This is a policy for board members that they sign off on. But basically, it requires them to let everyone know about interests they may have that could conflict with the interests of the organization, and sets up a procedure for disclosing those interests. So for example, if you sit on the board and your brother owns an insurance agency and your nonprofit is considering buying insurance, you need to make sure that you've disclosed this relationship and that the board knows about it and is making sure that they're getting competitive bids so it doesn't look like you are siphoning the charity's money off to your relative. And the IRS, we'll be talking in a minute about getting your tax exemption. The IRS, when you apply to become a tax-exempt organization, asks for, make sure that you ask if you do have a conflict of interest policy, and they have a sample available in their instructions for doing the 1023 form. So we are going to get into these legal requirements now, starting with incorporation, which is what happens at your local level, at the state level. So certificate of incorporation is a legal document, normally a couple pages long, that you would file with typically the Secretary of State or whatever the relevant agency is in your state. And you're creating a legal entity, a corporation. Now, technically, you do not have to do this. I mean, you could just, if you're a group of neighbors coming together to do a neighborhood cleanup on a regular basis, I mean, you don't ever have to incorporate or form an organization. But one reason that people do, if you are thinking it's something you're going to want to be doing long-term, year-round, you want the formal structure, and being a corporation will limit your personal individual liability. So in the certificate of incorporation, you tell the state things like the name of your organization, the names of your board members, and incorporators, which can be the same people. And each state is going to have a minimum number of people required to be listed as board members or incorporators. And even before you file the certificate of incorporation, you can reserve the name you want to give to your organization through your Secretary of State. And speaking of which, on the slide there we have a URL that is referring you to the National Association of State Charity Officials. You never knew there was such a thing, but there is. And they have a good directory on their website of state charity offices. So if you're not sure who is it in my state that may handle all this stuff, they have a good directory to get you started. So that is dealing with the state and incorporating, and usually, often at the same time, you're putting together your bylaws, which is another legal document. And we say it may be filed with your certificate of incorporation. You know, not every state wants you to file this officially, but many of them do. So often you're doing all this at the same time. And bylaws explain how your organization will operate in a procedural way. So things like the rules governing when you call board meetings, how you call a board meeting, what's a quorum, how and when the board members are elected, and how officers are elected. And explaining what the jobs of the officers are, like the chair of the board, the secretary, the treasurer. Also sets up things like term limits, board term limits, or even a procedure for removing someone from your board. So all these kinds of things that you may seem like a long way off, that we have to remove someone from our board, but these are the kinds of things you do want to enshrine in your bylaws from the beginning, because if you want to change your bylaws, it is a whole process, a long-term process, complicated process for the board to rewrite the bylaws and vote on them. So thinking through all this kind of stuff at the beginning is helpful. And we do have a reference at the bottom of the slide. On our website, we have a frequently asked question with a number of sample bylaws available. And I'll show you at the end, we'll do a brief tour of our website, and I'll show you how you can find that. All right, so that's dealing with your local government, your state government. Now you deal with the federal government if you want to get tax-exempt status. And this is literally, you apply to the IRS using the Form 1023 that we're mentioning here. And you tell them about everything you're doing, everything you plan to do, about your finances, about the people on your board. And they are making the determination whether or not you fit the guidelines and qualify as a tax-exempt charitable organization. So it's to your advantage when you file the 1023 to give them as much information as possible about your activities so that they are able to make that determination without having to go back to you and needing more information and dragging out the process. So why would you do this? Well, I think the word tax exempt implies some benefits, not having to pay corporate income tax. Also having the ability for donations. We mention individual donors. 501c3 organizations are the only type of nonprofit for which an individual can take a tax deduction if they give to you. Now, anybody can give to you at any time. I mean, your mother or your sister or someone, your best friend, may be so excited about what you're doing, they want to give you a donation right now. You don't have to be a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. It's just, legally, that person would not be entitled to take a tax deduction if you don't get the status. Also, related to our topic today, before you seek a grant, 501c3 organizations are pretty much the only type of organization that foundations are awarding grants to. Also, corporations, for the most part, will only give contributions to 501c3 organizations. So there is certainly many advantages to doing this. You can expect the turnaround if they don't have any questions about your application. If it's all straightforward, you're approved, maybe 2 to 3 months. It's when they have questions about your application that you may get assigned, that you'll get assigned a case manager. And it can drag on 6 months to a year for them to work through the application. You have 27 months after setting up your organization to file the 1023. 27 months during which their status would be retroactive. So what do I mean by that? If you incorporate your organization today, so you file with your state, if you submit your 1023 to the IRS sometime within the next 27 months, so you have over 2 years, once you get your status, it's retroactive back to today, or from when you first started. So that advantage to that is to say, be able to tell your donors, for example, those individual donors who may be giving to you now, when you do get the status, they would be able to still be able to claim the tax deduction. So there's really no reason to delay that application if you do intend to become a 501c3. Finally, once you get the main federal tax exemption, you then are looking at various state tax exemptions, such as the state corporate tax exemption, sales tax, etc. And you can't assume that you're automatically exempt from all state and local taxes. And especially sales tax is something that trips people up. Often each locality, each state is going to have its own process for becoming exempt from sales tax. Well, congratulations, you're legal. Now that you've submitted the appropriate paperwork, you need to start implementing your idea and providing the services and carrying out your program plan. Funders are looking for a track record, so you need to start putting that together and documenting your effectiveness. And it's never too early to start thinking about how you're going to document your success, your effectiveness. What does it mean if you're starting an organization designed to bring music enrichment programs to middle school girls? That's your mission, your basic program. And you start out your program and maybe you only have 10 people starting out, very small. You'll still want to think about, okay, well, what are we hoping that these girls get out of our program? What kind of outcomes are we looking for? And tracking things like, numbers of people recruited, numbers of people who stay in the program, progress towards specific goals for each student. So data collection, evaluation of your efforts are very important steps. And funders are going, as we say, they're going to start asking you, doesn't matter if you've only been in existence for a year, a few months, they're still going to ask, how do you evaluate your success? And speaking of funders, our next topic is thinking about your fundraising plan and financial planning. So pretty much as soon as you start your organization, you need to think about, okay, how are we going to pay for all this? How are we going to support ourselves? What is our financial plan? And relying on one funding source is going to put your organization in jeopardy. Whether that's one foundation, one corporation, one individual. So you're always going to be out there looking for as many different sources as possible. And we've been focusing on what foundations are looking for in grantees. Other funding sources such as governments or corporations, even individuals, are going to look for much the same things. So really demonstrating those key characteristics of successful nonprofits is going to apply across many different funding sources. Earned income is an especially important category for new nonprofits because without a track record of successful service delivery, you're going to be hard-pressed to convince foundations or governments to support you right away. So thinking about fee-based services could also count membership dues as earned income if you're setting yourself up to have members, people who make a certain donation every year and get benefits for being members. So that's something to think about. What does it mean for someone to be a member? And it could be something as simple as getting your quarterly newsletter or being invited to a member appreciation night every year, but something if you're setting yourself up to have members. And nonprofits certainly can charge for their services. They can sell products, and that is all called earned income. And any profits you earn, the IRS is going to look at if you do have any unrelated business income. So what that means, if you're doing something like selling a product that is not at all connected with your mission. So let's say you have a youth enrichment program and you're selling jewelry to raise money for the organization. You know, the IRS may look at that and say, well, that really has nothing to do with your program. That's, and any profit you are earning off of that is going to be taxable. However, if you can say, well, yes, we're selling jewelry, but it's made by the participants in our program, and it's, you know, a youth business. You know, they're making the jewelry, running the business, and then any income is going towards the program. Oh, okay, well, that is related to your mission, and that's not taxable, any kind of profit you may have. But earned income is certainly something to think about. For many organizations are supported by earned income as well as the private giving. So we've already been talking about that in terms of institutional philanthropy, also raising money from individuals. Usually, you know, the people in your community that can see the good work you're doing are going to be your best prospects and sources of support initially. And new nonprofits often try, you know, the small scale fundraising events, definitely emphasizing small, because you don't want to get in over your head with a big, you know, special event or gala where you're end up spending money and not making it up. But even like a small scale house party at the home of a board member where you're not putting out a lot of money, and board members can invite their friends and raise money in an informal setting. And we do have, we're referencing on the slide there, another class we have, the Introduction to Fundraising Planning, which talks all about putting this kind of plan together. Now, once your fundraising or earned income activities take off, we hope you'll have money coming in the door. So you'll then have to set up procedures to keep track of what you're doing with what money, keeping receipts, setting up a bank account, all that kind of fun stuff. And it's never too early to start thinking about financial controls. Putting the systems in place to spread the financial responsibilities among people so that there's no, you know, one person in charge of everything. That's not going to look good if once you get to the point where you're big enough to be audited and have, you know, outside auditors come in and look at your operations. They're going to be looking for financial controls. So if you are doing that, let's say you're setting yourself up as a membership program and your core steering committee, everyone got together and you sent out solicitation letters to 100 people. You merged your mailing lists and sent out to all your friends, and you're getting some return. You're getting some checks in the mail. One person should tally that up. Someone else should take the money to the bank. Someone else should reconcile the bank statements. So you have multiple people involved in the process to serve as checks and balances. And as you grow, you'll need to think about insurance, including coverage mandated once you have employees, like workers' comp, and then the overall fun topic of risk management, operating with care to avoid people suing you. And I know that's really not what you want to think about when you're starting an organization, but it is reality that you're going to need to think about all these things. Also finding office space, equipment, and we have on the slide a reference to an organization, the Council of Nonprofits, that's actually an umbrella organization of state associations of nonprofits. And we're telling you about this because it is a great, they can be great resources to find things like shared office space, deals on insurance, other types of vendors for nonprofits. So look to see if there is a state association for nonprofits that you could join or take advantage of. All right, so you're starting to implement your program. You're raising money. And if you're able to raise the funds, at some point, you'll want to hire paid staff. I mean, you're starting with all volunteer labor. You may stay all volunteer for years. But you may want to hire one person, a chief executive, to run the organization on a day-to-day basis. And the executive director is the person hired by the board to really execute the mission of the organization. So often the first person you're going to hire is the executive director. And that person, certainly can volunteer. I mean, you can call someone the executive director even if you're not paying the person. And many organizations start with a volunteer executive director. And once you have staffing in place, once you get beyond the 1 to 2 person stage, you're going to be thinking about preparing a personnel manual so that people will know what are the terms of employment, what are vacation days, sick leave policy, things like that. All right, well, you incorporated, you got your 501c3 status, your ongoing relationship with the state and the IRS, it's never ending. It's not just a one-time thing. You're going to keep filing annual reports to the states where you have an office and the state of incorporation if they're different. So when you do set up operations in another place, a state other than where you incorporated, you're going to register as a foreign corporation. And typically it's when you when you have a physical presence, when you start employing people in another state where you'd have to register with that state. And with both, you have to be reporting every year. So even if you incorporate one place, run your program, and then after you start growing and you want to expand and set up another office, you're going to register in that state, and then you'll have requirements and reporting for 2 states, and then the IRS. So the IRS annual return is called the 990. Everyone files a 990. There are different variations, different kinds of 990s based on your size and your revenue. So the smaller organizations, if your revenue is under a certain amount, you file the 990N, the e-postcard, which is basically just saying yes, we still exist, we're still around, but no matter how tiny you are, you still have to file some kind of annual return with the IRS by law. And actually, if you don't file for 3 years in a row, your exempt status is revoked automatically. So you definitely want to make sure, and this is the responsibility of the board, to make sure you're following all these laws and that you're in compliance. So with all that being said, the next slide is talking about, hey, do you still want to do this? And looking at the benefits and other issues. And the benefits, I think we've gone over all of this in terms of why you might want to put together a tax-exempt nonprofit organization. And really, I think if your idea is something that you see as ongoing, you want to have the formal structure, you want to be able to go out and be raising money on your own, it makes a lot of sense to set up the organization. However, it does cost money. There are filing fees. At your state may have a fee for filing your articles of incorporation. IRS, there is a filing fee with the 1023. I think it ranges, again, it depends on your size and how much revenue you have or may have already. I think the range is anywhere from $300 to $800 to file the 1023. We've already talked about the fact that there's a lot of paperwork. What do we mean about the control? The people who create nonprofits like to shape their creations, be in charge as the founder, but personal control is actually really limited in a nonprofit organization. It's subject to the laws and regulations, including its articles of incorporation, its bylaws, and you're required to have a board of directors who, in turn, are the people allowed to appoint the officers, choose the executive director. So it's not just going to be all about you in a nonprofit organization. And then we talked about ongoing administrative details. Public scrutiny. It's a nonprofit. You're dedicated to the public interest. Therefore, your finances are open to public inspection. The public may obtain copies of your state and federal filings, like your 990s, which include information about your budgets, also compensation of your top staff. So it's very transparent field that we're working in. So there are other options. And for one thing, if you think that your project, your idea could be accomplished working with another organization, really being adopted by an organization, just join an existing nonprofit. You don't have to set up your own. Then there's the formal fiscal sponsorship route. And fiscal sponsorship is working with an existing nonprofit, tax-exempt organization to help get you started and operate. So this is different than just becoming part of another organization, because there would be in a fiscal sponsorship arrangement, there is separation. And there is often you've incorporated, but you don't have 501c3 status. But you're affiliating with an organization that has similar mission interests, and you're really becoming a project of that organization, working under their umbrella, and they're helping you with their 501c3 status and administrative oversight. They are helping you raise money. So you may be eligible for grants for funding that you wouldn't get otherwise. And often it is a temporary arrangement, because the understanding maybe eventually you would be going out to get your own 501c3 status. And we do have, again, on our website, some articles, frequently asked questions on fiscal sponsorship. How do I find a fiscal sponsor? So I'm going to go and do a brief little tour of our GrantSpace website, grantspace.org. And there's a skill area, skill sets, and the skill set to focus on to start out with is related to incorporation. Now notice there's also one for fundraising planning and boards, some of the other things we were talking about. So here's the incorporation skill set page, and these skill sets our skill set pages are all set up the same way, that there's multimedia content at the top. Then if you scroll down, we have more and more resources, like books, other classes, like this class, another online class, Getting Ready for Foundation Fundraising. We do a lot of online chats on GrantSpace. And this is a replay of one about putting together a business plan. Then we have this link to startup resources by state. So I want to take a look at that. This is a great directory we put together to get localized information about setting up a nonprofit in your state. So I'm going to click on Colorado just to show you the kinds of things, that you're going to find. So we have some guides, the nonprofit toolkit for various geographic areas, and specific information about starting a nonprofit in that state, and then links to the state agencies. So remember I had that website for NASCO, the National Association of State Charity Officials. Well, this is cutting to the chase a little bit more, because these are all Colorado sites that you can go to directly to get the information you need. So back on the GrantSpace website, GrantSpace, the skill set area for incorporation, here are a number of our frequently asked questions, like how do I start a nonprofit, what are the advantages, disadvantages, what are the articles of incorporations, where can I find examples, and we have a similar question for bylaws, by the way. And then where can I find examples of fiscal sponsorship agreements? Now I'm going to go back a couple slides to the GrantSpace home page, because we do have a search function on grantspace.org. So when you get here, you can search fiscal sponsor, bylaws, to go right to that information. So I'm just going to scroll through again, same slides I already just showed you. To end with, on grantspace.org, we do have an online chat service and email reference. So if you do have follow-up questions, if you've looked through those frequently asked questions, looked through all the information we have online, you still have questions about how do I do this, how do I find that, please do talk to our librarians. And also, we do have the materials for this webinar available online at this course materials page, where you can download the slide outline, a resource list, and the checklist for new nonprofits, which is a good summary of what we've covered. So I want to thank you all for joining us today and encourage you to check out other resources of the Foundation Center and wish you success in all of your endeavors.